My name is Ethan. I'm 33, and until recently, I thought I was working toward a future with the people I loved most, my family. What I didn't know was that I had been building something that would never be mine. And what I thought was unconditional support from my parents. It turned out to be manipulation and exploitation. It all started 10 years ago. My father, Mr. Martin, owned a small family-run bookstore in the heart of the town. It wasn't the largest, but it was known for its cozy atmosphere, local author signings, and the feeling of nostalgia it evoked. One day, over dinner, my father turned to me with a smile. He was always a man of few words, but his actions spoke volumes. "You're going to learn how to run this place someday, Ethan," he said, wiping his mouth with a napkin. "It's not just a business, it's a legacy. You're going to carry it on." I was honored. At that moment, I thought it was a privilege to be the one to inherit such a family treasure. I was the oldest son, the one who was supposed to take over. My younger sister, Natalie, was still in high school, and I was already working part-time at the bookstore while finishing my college degree. It felt like the right path, the path my parents had laid out for me. After all, this was our future. The work wasn't glamorous, but it was satisfying. I would arrive early, make the morning coffee for the loyal customers, and spend hours stocking shelves, organizing books, and running the register. My father never paid me a salary, but he would tell me, "This is part of your inheritance, Ethan. Someday, it will all be yours." I took pride in this. I believed him. I didn't mind the long hours. I didn't mind missing out on hanging out with friends or attending social events. My family had given me everything I needed: food, a roof over my head, and this beautiful store. I was building something that would eventually be mine. But as the years passed, something didn't feel right. My parents started living more comfortably than ever before. They bought a new car, renovated their house, and went on vacations to places I could only dream of. Meanwhile, I was working long hours in the store, with no pay, no savings, and no time to enjoy life. When I tried to talk to them about it, they'd brush me off with the same words: "You're part of the family, Ethan. You don't need money. It will all be yours one day." But the truth? I wasn't getting anything. As time went on, my younger sister, Natalie, went off to college. She was studying abroad, enjoying life, while I was stuck behind the counter in the bookstore. It felt unfair, but I kept telling myself it would pay off in the end. After all, I was working for the future, right? One evening, as we all sat down for dinner, I decided it was time to ask. My heart was pounding in my chest as I looked at my parents, waiting for the right moment. I had been holding this question in for so long, and I could no longer keep it to myself. I needed answers. "Mom, Dad," I said, taking a deep breath. "I've been working here for a decade, and I think it's time we talk about my future with the bookstore. I need to know what's going to happen when you retire, or when I take over." My father, Mr. Martin, lowered his newspaper, his eyes narrowing slightly as he looked at me over his glasses. "What do you mean, Ethan?" "I mean, I've worked here for 10 years, without pay, and I think it's time I get a stake in the business," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I've helped build this store, and I deserve something in return." My mother, Claire, who was sitting at the table, paused. Her eyes darkened. "Ethan, you've always known this was our business. There are no shares or anything like that. You're part of the family, and that's all you need." I felt my blood pressure rise. "But what about my future? How am I supposed to live, Dad? I've been doing everything, running the store, managing the inventory, greeting customers, and yet I'm not even getting a paycheck. What's the deal here?" My father leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "You're part of this family, Ethan. This store has been here for generations. We don't work for money, we work for each other. But I'm not asking for a handout." I raised my voice without meaning to. "I'm not asking for charity. I just want something for all the years I've put into this business." My mother sighed deeply. "You're being dramatic, Ethan. You've always had food on the table, a roof over your head. What more do you want? I couldn't believe my ears. What more do I want? I want what's mine. I've worked my entire adult life, and yet I have nothing to show for it. I don't even have savings. I can't even afford to go out and have fun like my friends do. My father's voice turned cold. You're not owed anything, Ethan. You've been a part of this family, and that's all that matters. The bookstore is for everyone. His words hit me like a slap across the face. What do you mean not owed anything? I've been working here since I was 18. You promised me that one day it would be mine. No, my father said, his tone final. We never promised you ownership. The store belongs to the family. But I've worked day in and day out, while you've been out living your lives, taking vacations, buying new things. And now you're telling me I don't even deserve a piece of it? My voice shook with anger. That's enough, Ethan, my mother snapped, but I wasn't done. I stood up from the table, feeling a cold rush of adrenaline. You know what? Forget it. I don't want anything from you. I just want a share in the business. Something. Anything. Just show me that my hard work meant something. My father sighed heavily, rubbing his face as if exhausted by my demands. Ethan, this business is already in someone's name. At that moment, a cold shiver ran down my spine. In whose name? I asked, barely able to speak. My mother's face turned pale, and before either of them could answer, my younger sister, Natalie, walked into the room, casually throwing her purse on the table. She looked at me with a smile, as if she had no idea what was happening. It's in my name, of course, she said. The room fell silent. My heart stopped. What? I breathed, the words barely making it out of my mouth. What do you mean it's in your name? She shrugged, not even looking at me. Dad and Mom put the store in my name months ago. They said it was for the best. I couldn't breathe. I had been working for nothing. For years, I had worked without a paycheck, without any recognition, and now it was all going to her. My sister, who had done nothing. My sister, who had been allowed to live a carefree life, while I slaved away. I looked at my parents, hoping they would say something. But they just looked away. It was as if they didn't even care. And then my sister added, "Don't worry, Ethan. You were never meant to run the business. You're just not cut out for it." The sting of her words was like a punch in the gut. I couldn't believe it. All those years of my life, gone. I turned and left the room, slamming the door behind me, and as I walked out into the cold night air, I realized I had just lost everything. But it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I spent the next few days in a blur. Everything I had worked for, everything I had believed in, had crumbled. I couldn't look at my parents the same way anymore. How could they betray me like that? I had given up my youth, my freedom, my dreams to build something that wasn't even mine to begin with. And Natalie? She had everything handed to her, no questions asked. It felt like the ultimate betrayal, one that I couldn't easily shake off. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't let this go, not after everything I had sacrificed. But what could I do? They had already taken everything, my future, my inheritance, my sense of belonging. I needed to find a way to get what was rightfully mine. The bookstore was my life. I didn't care about money, I cared about the work, the customers who trusted us, and the legacy my father had promised me. But now, it was just another business to my family. And Natalie? She had no interest in running it. She had no understanding of what it took. She was in it for the prestige, for the name. But I was the one who had kept it running all these years. I needed answers. I needed control. I couldn't just sit back and watch it all slip away. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind was racing with thoughts of how to regain my position, how to take back the control I had lost. There had to be something I could do. I needed to talk to someone who could give me advice, help me figure out what steps to take. But who? I thought of James. James had been a friend of mine since high school. He had worked with me on a few business projects in the past, and though we had gone our separate ways after college, I knew he had a sharp mind for business. I picked up my phone and sent him a text. "Hey, James. Can we talk? I need some advice about something important." Within minutes, he responded. "Of course. You good?" "Not really. I'm coming over tomorrow. We need to talk in person." James didn't ask any questions. He just agreed. The next day, I found myself sitting in his small apartment, pouring out everything that had happened in the past few days. I explained the betrayal, the years of hard work, and how it all seemed to be falling apart. James listened quietly, nodding occasionally, before finally speaking. "Ethan, what your family did is messed up, no doubt. But the reality is that the business is legally in your sister's name. You can't just walk in and take it back without some serious consequences. You're going to need to play this smart." I leaned forward. "So, what do I do? Do I just let her have it?" No. You need to fight for your stake," James said firmly. "First off, you need to look at any paperwork your parents have on the business. Do they have a will? An agreement? Anything that shows they promised it to you?" I shook my head. "They never put anything in writing. It was all verbal. My dad kept saying it would be mine one day, but there was nothing official." James paused, thinking. "That's going to be tough. Without any official documentation, it's going to be a he said she said situation. But if you can find any evidence, anything, that shows they were planning on passing it to you, then you have leverage." I ran my hand through my hair, frustrated. "It's all just a lie. I've been working myself to the bone, and now I'm the one left out in the cold." James looked at me with sympathy. "I get it, man. But you're not done. You have options. You could try to buy your sister out. Or, if you really want to take control, you might have to take legal action. But before you go down that road, you need to think it through. This could tear your family apart." I looked at him, considering his words. "So, what's the first step?" James leaned back in his chair. "Start by gathering information. Talk to your parents, find out if there's anything they haven't told you. If you can, find out who's really in control of the bookstore's finances. Is it just your sister, or are your parents still involved? That's your first move." I nodded. "I'll figure it out." Over the next few days, I gathered everything I could. I went through old business documents that had been stored in the office, digging through boxes of receipts, contracts, and old notebooks. It was all a mess, but something caught my eye. There, tucked away in the back of one of the folders, was a letter from a lawyer. It wasn't addressed to me, but it was clear it had something to do with the business. I took a photo of it, and the next morning, I called James. "You're not going to believe what I found," I said when he picked up. "What's up?" "There's a letter from a lawyer. It looks like my parents were working on a will for the bookstore, but it's not finalized. It's dated a few months ago, and there's a mention of transferring ownership to someone. I don't know if it's Natalie or me, but it's something." "Good find," James said. "That could be your ticket. You need to see that letter, and you need to talk to that lawyer." I took his advice and contacted the lawyer mentioned in the letter. It wasn't easy, but I eventually got an appointment. I had no idea how this meeting would go, but I was determined to find out what my parents had been hiding. And if there was any chance of getting what was rightfully mine, I wasn't going to let it slip away. The day of the meeting arrived, and I walked into the lawyer's office, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't know what I was going to find, but I knew I had to do this. It was now or never. I took a deep breath before entering the lawyer's office. The tension in my chest felt unbearable, but I had come this far, and I couldn't back down now. The door clicked shut behind me as I stepped inside, my eyes adjusting to the dim, sterile lighting of the office. The lawyer, a middle-aged man with silver hair and an air of detached professionalism, stood up as I entered. "Mr. Rivers?" he asked, extending his hand. I shook it firmly, trying to appear calm despite the storm brewing inside me. "Yes, that's me," I replied, forcing my voice to sound steady. "Please, have a seat," he gestured to the chair across from his desk. I sat down, my hands resting on my knees as I looked at him, waiting for him to speak. "You mentioned you found a letter. It's regarding the estate and the business?" he asked, flipping through a stack of papers on his desk. "Yes, I did," I said, pulling out my phone and showing him the photo of the letter I had found. "It's dated a few months ago, and it looks like it's about transferring ownership of the bookstore. But I don't know to whom. My sister, Natalie, has taken control, but I thought the business was supposed to be mine." The lawyer took the phone from me and studied the photo for a moment. Then, his expression shifted slightly, though he tried to maintain his professionalism. "I see," he murmured. "This is quite complicated, Mr. Rivers. Your parents had indeed been working on revising their will in recent months, but as far as I can see from the documents, they had not finalized the transfer yet. However, the documents do indicate some intention to transition ownership to Natalie. There's no mention of you, unfortunately." My stomach sank. "What do you mean, no mention of me?" He looked me in the eye, his expression softening with a hint of sympathy. "The draft will, from what I understand, was meant to give Natalie control of the business and estate. Your parents, at least in this draft, appear to have decided she was the more capable person to take over." "I'm sorry." I could feel the blood drain from my face. This couldn't be happening. I had worked for years, poured everything I had into this business, and now it seemed my parents had already made their decision, without even telling me. "So, that's it then?" I said, the words slipping out before I could stop myself. "There's nothing I can do?" The lawyer paused, clearly hesitant. "Not necessarily. There are still some open questions about the finality of the will. If your parents did not sign it, then it's not legally binding. There's still a chance, but it's a long shot." I leaned forward, my heart racing. "How long a shot?" "Well," the lawyer began, "it depends on the circumstances surrounding their decision. If you have any evidence, anything that suggests your parents had a different intention, something that wasn't reflected in the will, then you might be able to challenge it. But, I should warn you, family disputes like this can get messy, and they rarely end well." I felt a wave of frustration wash over me. This was my last chance. "What do you mean, family disputes rarely end well?" "Fighting over an inheritance can tear families apart," the lawyer said quietly. "It can lead to lasting resentment and legal battles that drag on for years. I can't say it's the right path, but you do have options." I took a moment to process what he had said. The weight of the situation was suffocating. On one hand, I could walk away, accept the reality that my parents had chosen Natalie, and move on with my life. On the other hand, I could fight, a fight that would not only cost me emotionally but could also destroy whatever bond remained between me and my family. But I couldn't let go. Not yet. Not after everything I had sacrificed. "I want to fight," I said, my voice steady with resolve. "I want to contest the will. I can't just let her take everything. There has to be something that proves my parents meant for me to take over the bookstore." The lawyer studied me for a moment, then nodded slowly. "It's not going to be easy. But I'll help you gather the necessary information. We'll need to dig deeper, find out what your parents were really thinking. If there's any chance they intended for you to inherit the business, we'll find it." I felt a spark of hope flicker inside me. It wasn't over. Not yet. Over the next few weeks, the lawyer and I worked together to gather everything we could. I contacted old family friends, hoping someone might have witnessed my parents discussing their plans for the future. I scoured through every document I could find in the house, every letter, every conversation I'd ever had with my parents about the future of the bookstore. One day, as I was going through some old records in the attic, I found something, a journal entry my father had written years ago. It wasn't much, just a few lines, but it was enough to make my heart race. "Ethan has the passion for this business. I know he's ready to take it on when the time comes. Natalie has her own dreams, but this place is his legacy. I'll make sure he knows this. I stared at the words, my pulse quickening. This was the proof I needed. My father had always intended for me to take over. But what had happened? Why hadn't he told me about the will? I sent a photo of the journal entry to the lawyer, and we scheduled another meeting. This was it. This could change everything. The lawyer's office was unusually quiet when I arrived for our next meeting. I could feel the tension building in my chest as I sat down, clutching the journal entry in my hands. It was my best shot, my lifeline. But as much as I hoped it would be enough, a nagging doubt lingered. What if it wasn't? What if it wasn't the solid proof I needed? The lawyer, Mr. Harris, was reviewing some paperwork when I entered. He glanced up at me, then his eyes fell on the photo of my father's journal entry that I had sent him. Slowly, he set down the papers in front of him, his expression grave. Mr. Rivers, he began, his voice measured, this is a significant piece of evidence. It shows your father's intentions clearly. He wanted you to take over the business, no doubt about it. However, it's not conclusive on its own. We'll need more, something stronger. My heart sank a little. What do you mean? Isn't this enough? It's a direct statement from my father about the bookstore. I agree, it's a strong indication of his intentions, Mr. Harris said, leaning back in his chair. But courts require more than a personal note. They want something more formal. And unless we can find other documentation or credible witnesses who can attest to your father's words or actions, this could be seen as circumstantial evidence. That's why we'll need to keep digging. I could feel the hope slipping away. The road ahead felt even longer now. The prospect of fighting this in court was becoming more daunting by the day. But I couldn't give up. Not after everything I'd worked for. Not when I had proof that my father had intended for me to take over the bookstore. I understand, I said, my voice determined. But I'm not giving up. There has to be something else. Anything. We'll do our best, Mr. Harris replied, nodding. For now, I suggest we focus on getting statements from people who knew your father. Anyone who might remember him talking about his plans for the business. I left the lawyer's office that day with a heavy heart but a renewed sense of purpose. I had to fight for what was mine, no matter how difficult it became. I started reaching out to old friends of my parents, former employees of the bookstore, and anyone who had known my father well. Some people remembered small details, comments my father had made during quiet moments, his conversations about the future of the bookstore, but nothing substantial enough to sway the case. Days turned into weeks, and the pressure was building. Natalie had continued her control over the bookstore, pushing her agenda in every way she could. She'd begun making changes, some that I knew my father would never have agreed with. She'd hired new managers, changed the layout of the store, and even started offering a new line of merchandise that felt completely out of place. It was as if she was trying to erase everything my father had built. The anger inside me boiled over, and I decided it was time to confront her. I needed answers, something concrete to show that she had no right to take over. I had to stand up to her. The person I had always avoided, the one who made me feel less than, now had control over the very thing that defined me. It was time to take back what was mine. I walked into the bookstore one chilly afternoon, determined and ready for a confrontation. The bell above the door jingled, and Natalie looked up from behind the counter. Her face softened when she saw me, but there was a subtle coldness in her eyes. "Ethan," she said, her voice polite but distant. "What brings you here?" I squared my shoulders, forcing the anger down. "I need to talk to you." "It's about the bookstore." Her expression shifted slightly, but she didn't say anything. I could tell she knew what this was about, even if she didn't want to acknowledge it. "I've been looking into things, Natalie," I continued, my voice firm. "And I know what you've been doing. Changing things without asking. Making decisions like this place is yours." She crossed her arms, leaning against the counter. "I'm just doing what needs to be done, Ethan. This business has been stagnating for years, and I'm trying to bring it into the future. You should understand that." No, I said, stepping closer. I understand that you've taken something that wasn't yours. The business, the house, it's all mine. My father wanted me to take over. He told me himself. Her eyes narrowed, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of guilt pass over her face. But it was gone as quickly as it came. That's not true. You don't know what you're talking about. Our parents made their decision, and it's final. I'm the one who's in charge now. No, you're not, I replied, my voice rising. I'm going to fight you. I'm going to make sure the truth comes out. You can't just erase what our parents wanted. Natalie's face hardened. If you want to make it a fight, then fine. But you won't win. You'll lose, just like you always do. Her words cut deep, and for a moment, I felt the sting of every insult she'd ever thrown my way. But this time, something inside me snapped. I wasn't going to let her control this anymore. I wasn't the same person I used to be. You don't get to decide that, I said through gritted teeth. I'm taking this to court, and I'll do whatever it takes to get what's rightfully mine. She smirked, a cold, calculating look in her eyes. I'm looking forward to it, then. Let's see who wins. I turned and walked out of the store, the door swinging shut behind me. But this time, I wasn't leaving defeated. I had made my stand. The fight was just beginning, and no matter how hard it got, I wasn't going to stop until I had what my father had promised me. The courtroom was silent as I took my seat, the weight of the past few months pressing down on my shoulders. It felt surreal to be here, facing Natalie in this formal setting instead of across the counter in the bookstore, but in some ways, this was even more personal. This was the culmination of everything I had fought for. Not just the business, but the legacy my father had left behind. Mr. Harris sat next to me, his expression calm but focused. He had been with me through every step of this battle, and his guidance had been invaluable. But even he could sense the gravity of this moment. We had fought hard to get to this point, but the truth was, we were still uncertain. No matter how much evidence we gathered, it would ultimately come down to how the court perceived our claims. And facing off against Natalie, the woman who had spent her life undermining my every move, felt like the most intimidating challenge yet. The judge entered, and the room stood in unison, a sense of authority sweeping over the proceedings. As we all took our seats again, I couldn't help but glance at Natalie. She sat across from me, her face betraying little emotion, though I could tell by the way she held herself that she was just as determined to win this as I was. But what she didn't understand, what none of them did, was that this wasn't just about a bookstore for me. It was about reclaiming my identity, my father's legacy, and taking back control of my own life. Natalie's lawyer began speaking first, painting a picture of a successful business that needed someone with the experience and vision to move it forward. My client, Ms. Rivers, has proven time and again that she knows how to manage this business, he argued. Her track record is impeccable, and she's made significant strides to ensure the bookstore remains profitable. Ethan Rivers, on the other hand, has been absent for years and has no real knowledge of how to run this business. Natalie's lawyer was good. I had to admit that. He played the role of the confident, polished advocate with skill, even throwing in a few remarks about my lack of involvement in the business over the years. It was true, I had stepped away after I left home, but I had my reasons. I had tried to live my own life, separate from the family's expectations. And while that might have been a mistake, it didn't give Natalie the right to seize everything that belonged to me. When it was finally my turn, Mr. Harris stood up and began to speak on my behalf, presenting the evidence we had gathered. Your Honor, we have provided undeniable proof that Mr. Rivers' father intended for him to take over the family business. This includes a personal letter from Mr. Rivers' father, outlining his wishes for the future of the bookstore. He glanced over at me, giving me a reassuring nod, before continuing. Additionally, we have statements from several people who worked closely with Mr. Rivers' father and can attest to his intentions for his son to eventually take charge. The evidence is clear, and we ask the court to honor the wishes of a man who built this business with his own hands. I sat up straighter, the nerves in my stomach slowly starting to settle as Mr. Harris made his argument. It wasn't just about the letter now, it was about the relationships, the years of history that Natalie and her lawyer were trying to rewrite. They were trying to erase everything that had come before, and I wasn't going to let that happen. As Mr. Harris finished speaking, the judge took a moment to consider everything. The silence was almost unbearable. I felt like the air had thickened around me, and the weight of the decision hung over us all. I could see Natalie's eyes glinting with confidence, but I wasn't intimidated. Not anymore. The judge cleared his throat and looked at both of us. This is a complex case. On one hand, we have evidence of the father's intentions for his son to inherit the business. On the other hand, we have a daughter who has managed the business for several years and has demonstrated her ability to keep it thriving. I will need time to review all the evidence before making my final decision. The decision wasn't coming that day, and that realization hit me harder than I expected. We had come this far, but there was still uncertainty ahead. Still, I wasn't backing down. The next few days felt like an eternity. I stayed in the city for the duration of the trial, unable to focus on anything other than the court case. The bookstore was in my mind constantly, but I knew it was out of my hands for the moment. I could only wait for the judge's ruling. During this time, Natalie reached out to me. She sent me a message, suggesting we meet to discuss things. I was hesitant, but part of me wanted to hear what she had to say. Was she ready to admit she'd gone too far? Was she willing to let go? I agreed to meet her at a small cafe, a neutral place where we could talk without the pressure of the courtroom hanging over us. As I walked into the cafe, I spotted her immediately, sitting at a table in the corner, sipping coffee with a calm demeanor. She looked up as I approached, her eyes unreadable. "Ethan," she greeted me with a slight nod. "I'm surprised you agreed to meet." "I didn't want to," I replied honestly. "But I'm here now." "So, what is it you want?" Natalie sighed, setting down her cup. "I know this has been difficult for you," she began, her voice softer than I had ever heard it. "But the business, it's mine now. I don't think you're ready for it. I don't think you ever were." I shook my head, feeling the anger flare inside me once more. "You don't get to make that decision for me, Natalie. I'm not a kid anymore, and I'm not going to let you take everything away from me." For the first time in our lives, there was no immediate response from her. She looked at me, really looked at me, as if she was weighing whether to argue further or to finally give in. But I wasn't sure if I was ready to hear the truth. The days after our meeting felt even more uncertain. But finally, the judge rendered his decision. The courtroom was packed as we awaited the ruling, and I could feel the tension in the air. When the judge spoke, his voice was firm. After careful review of all evidence presented, he began, "The court rules in favor of Ethan Rivers. The wishes of his late father are clear, and it is the court's belief that Mr. Rivers is the rightful heir to the business. Ms. Rivers, while you have managed the store admirably, this was not your father's intention." Natalie sat frozen in her seat, her face pale, as the words sank in. I felt a sense of relief wash over me, but it was quickly followed by a pang of guilt. This victory wasn't just mine, it was for my father. And now, it was time to rebuild what had been lost. As I left the courtroom, I knew this was just the beginning of a new chapter. It wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to take control of the bookstore and my life once again. Let me know if you need any further edits or adjustments.